Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to our special edition of Polotiki. My name is Mahlatsi Mahlasi, politics editor here at News 24. A warm welcome to our viewers on news24.com and also an extended warm welcome to our Media 24 family. We are coming to you live from Media Park in Auckland Park. And this afternoon, I'm in conversation with the editors of the City Press and also Daily Sun as we count down to the much anticipated ANC elective conference. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mondli Makanya, on my far left, the editor of News 24, and you, Reggie Mwalusi, the editor of Daily Sun.
Thank you.
Let's get into it. This has been labeled a do or die moment for the ANC. Is that something that you agree with, Mondli?
Definitely. I think the ANC conference in 2007 was probably the most eventful conference because it was a big clash between Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma, and it introduced a new culture of slates, it introduced a new culture of fighting, of bitter rivalry within the ANC, and we saw that the next conference in 2012 was also a very hard-fought one. But this one is really, I know it sounds like a cliche, it is really a battle for the soul of the ANC because the Jacob Zuma era has been quite a destructive one inside the ANC. It's been destructive in terms of the factionalism, in terms of like the corruption and the lack of morality that's really been entrenched. So I think there you have what you can call a battle between the more corrupt elements in the ANC and the lesser corrupt elements in the ANC. It's not a battle between good and evil, but I think it's going to determine the trajectory of what the ANC becomes going forward. I mean, is it a populist, rough ANC, or is it a more sane ANC?
As Mondli was saying there, a crucial one for the ANC, but also for South Africa. Remember, you can join in this conversation by using hashtag ANC Decide. Reggie, Mondli is basically saying this is a do or die moment for the ANC, and the way he sees it, there are no angels or devils in this battle. But what does it mean for South Africans that are not ANC supporters?
It means quite a lot. It means South Africans now have this glaring opportunity in front of them to see here's a governing party is going through one of its most challenging times since, say, 1960. Now, these branch delegates who will be here in Johannesburg, they have to decide to say, this person that we're going to elect, is it the kind of person that the ANC can entrust, and is it the kind of leader, you know, out of all the candidates who are there, is it the kind of candidate who can, we can say, this person will definitely carry us through 2019, because 2019 is not going to be easy for them. And here's this candidate, here's this new leader who also has to face up to a challenge that the ANC has missed the opportunity to self-correct. They are beyond self-correction. Now this new leader must come in and say, how do we move from here as a governing party and entrust not only the gone trust of the so-called black middle class, but the trust that's so fastly dissipating, mostly with you know, grassroots voters. Whether you go to townships, to villages, they are saying, we're still poor. After 23 years, the governing party is talking about progress. What progress is there? There hasn't been any progress. They remain poor. So that kind of a leader, that's what they need to start thinking about after mid-December.
Obviously, what happens within government is also linked directly to that ANC elective conference. Mondli, we are currently going through a very difficult time, an economy in crisis, loss of trust in state institutions. But for the first time, we are seeing 7 presidential hopefuls joining in this race. Are they really 7? And have any of them told us anything about how they would resolve the crisis of in government?
Well, it's not really 7 or 8, some would say even 9, because like a lot of people have put up their hands. The good thing is, I mean, like in reality, there are 2 candidates. It's Nkosazana Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa who are the real candidates, and then there are also those who have, obviously, who are pretenders. But I think what's important is that what has been very positive about this year was that you had a lot of people actually feeling free to say, I am so-and-so, and I believe I can be the president of this country. And that whole culture and tradition of the ANC of saying, no, 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 it's not in the...
It's the branches.
It's the branches who will say, and I will serve if the branches say so. People actually say, no, 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 I am ambitious enough. I have answers to the nation's problems. And I think it's a very, very good thing that happened. And a lot of it had to do because of the dysfunction. I mean, I think we must thank Jacob Zuma for that he created that dysfunction that allowed that freedom for people to actually state their ambition and state what they stand for. I don't think that any of them have really told us what it is that they have not given us a vision of a South Africa that they would want that they would want. I think they've given us a vision of a South Africa that they don't want. And in the case of Cyril Ramaphosa, obviously, who was the strongest one, he's leading the forces that are anti the state capture, anti-corruption, anti the destruction that defined the Zuma period. But so it's not this is where I want this country to go. And in terms of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, all she's really given us is rhetoric that I will implement radical economic transformation. I will speed up. I mean, that the white people still control everything, and I will make sure that white people. It's been a very negative campaign. I mean, and I think totally against the path that we set on in 1994.
But we have to give credit that the ANC is definitely moving a shift, as you're talking about the traditions of the party where candidates will be a bit more shy in expressing their political ambitions. But can we, in fairness, expect them to be speaking policy when policy is decided by the party, Mondli?
Yes, I think you can, because you are the face of the party. You are the person who says, I want to lead South Africa into a new era. And so you should be providing your vision of South Africa. And I think because we have entered a new era of politics where the individual is free to do so. Yes, obviously, you still have to take your thinking, your views, your policy ideas to a party congress, and the party congress will then formalize and implement. But I think I, as a citizen, or as all citizens, want to know that who is this person? What does he or she stand for? And how will this person get us out of the economic rut and moral rut that we're in?
Reggie, in the absence of details on policy and what they would do in government, Cyril Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma have emerged as the front runners. What gives them the urge beyond the other candidates, the likes of Lindiwe Sisulu, who's been a popular leader in the ANC, the likes of Jeff Radebe, longest running cabinet member, the likes of Matthews Posa, who's been there as a treasurer general, a former premier, and of course the speaker of parliament, Baleka Mbete. But what has given these two candidates the edge beyond the others?
Look, Mahlatse, let's start with the basic one. The basic one is that Cyril is the deputy. The tradition in the ANC has always been that the deputy takes over. And
some would dispute that.
They'll dispute that. And then we also have NDZ. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma obviously is now being touted as this person who should take over, so that the current agenda that most within the ANC, more especially the CR17 camp, they don't want to see that agenda continue. Those are the two. They've got the edge. They are senior party leaders. They've been around. And then you look at other candidates. Those other candidates, much as they're senior, but they're not as prominent as the two, as Mondli earlier on alluded. They are prominent, and they are prominent with their own flaws. I mean, just for the past few days, we have seen what's been happening. We have seen Nkosazana now being exposed, that she's associating with some tobacco smugglers. We have seen Cyril putting his foot in it, and Limpopo, where now he's announcing a deputy that no one ever expected that this person, she can be the deputy. And that's the edge that we see. And obviously, I mean, come December, these are the two people that the branch delegates will be looking at. These are the two people, branches, regions, and provinces are really discussing these two candidates.
Mondli, let's go into the campaigns of the two candidates. As you've said, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma has focused on radical economic transformation, but very little detail on how it will work. She's shown us what is wrong with the economy, but not how they would actually reverse it. But she has gained popularity. We are expecting some provinces like KZN, her home province, to be behind her. We are also seeing them making inroads in provinces like Mpumalanga and all of that. What has elevated her to this position? I mean, she's one of 3 women candidates that are contesting, but she is clearly making the inroads.
Look, just before I answer that one, I wouldn't say she's told us what's wrong with the economy. I think she's told us what's wrong with the structure of the economy. She's told us that there's inequality in South Africa. She's told us that most of the wealth is in white hands, most of the land is in white hands, etc., etc. And she's just spewed a whole lot of rhetoric. I know that. I mean, like, South Africans just walk out there, just go to Sandton and walk into a restaurant, you'll see that wealth is in white hands. I mean, like, I don't think that's rocket science. So, I mean, like, it's been a populist message that has been crafted by the people who basically are Zumas and maidens, essentially. I mean, like, the Women's League, the Youth League, the Veterans League. So that's been her message. It doesn't have substance, it doesn't have detail. You can shout grievance all you like, but the fact is, in 2017, there are challenges in the economy that actually answers have been given in the NDP about, like, how do we get from here to here by 2030 and beyond. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So anyway, but what has made her popular? I actually think that she was popular. Her popularity actually hasn't been as much now as it was, let's say, 6-8 months ago. If we had spoken 6-8 months ago, she was a runaway candidate, precisely because she had these structures behind her. She had a much more organized campaign, and she had foot soldiers, and they were organizing rallies for her. There were church services, there were memorial lectures, and so on, that she was speaking at. So in the public mind, she had the initial momentum. But I think as soon as the Cyril campaign kicked in and other people's campaigns kicked in, particularly Lindiwe Sisulu would probably be the only one, besides the 2 of them who actually have been campaigning, I think her star has waned somewhat. She still remains one of the 2, but she's not the runaway anymore. And I think that all that had to do with the fact that she identified herself too closely with Zuma. She was not prepared to speak out against the things that were wrong. And then she was not prepared to actually say state capture. She was not prepared to speak against the Guptas and against corruption, because obviously she can't.
Why can't she? I mean, she's somebody who has been out of active politics in South Africa for a while. She was the AU chairperson. She has tried to make it a point that, you know, she is not standing because of any past relations with the president. What has made it difficult for her to speak about those issues that are currently what South Africans are talking about and are worried about?
Look, the Women's League in particular, her supporters and Women's League in particular, have tried to project her as, no, she's the potential first female president of South Africa. She's her own person. She's been successful in 3 ministries. She's a veteran of the ANC. She's served on the continent, at the highest levels on the continent. So she is her own candidate. But we know that she's not her own candidate. And I know that I'll get shot for it by those people. The fact is, she is Jacob Zuma's candidate. And he has come out very clearly in support of her. The machinery around her, as I said, the Women's League, Youth League, and the Veterans, the MKVA, and all the money elements around the thing are Zuma's people. And so she cannot offend that particular constituency. She cannot offend the premier.
But I can still be friends with my ex-husband's friends. And which is kind of the argument that have put. But do you think, Reggie, that has been the thing that has dimmed her shine. I mean, I was at one of her rallies, and I was just counting. I mean, you had Ace Magashule there, a staunch supporter of President Jacob Zuma. You had people like Humphrey Memezi, who had his own scandals around buying paintings at the McDonald's. You had Carl Niehaus dancing there on the stage as well. You had Pule Mabe, who's also had his own controversies. Has that group actually had a serious dent on her campaign?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have just said it yourself. I mean, you look at the caliber, the profile of those people. I mean, who takes seriously someone like Colin Maine? Is Colin Maine really an ANC Youth League president? Besides the fact that he's overage, and I mean, who is he? What has he done to the Youth League? Is the Youth League even still there? I mean, you take someone like KB at the MKMVA. I mean, KB is a strong, staunch supporter of President Zuma, that we all know. And the whole campaign machinery has really missed the point. While we sit here, we crunch down the numbers that Stats SA says South Africa's unemployment is at its highest at 28%. You tell us about RET, but you're not saying this is how RET is going to address the 28% unemployment. And you are on a campaign trail, and you are talking to unemployed people in townships, in villages, but you are not speaking to the core of the solution of their problems.
The argument from the NDZ campaign, because that is what they're calling the campaigns, it's NDZ, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma 17, and also CR17 for Cyril Ramaphosa, the deputy president. But the argument coming from the campaign is that linking her to President Jacob Zuma is part of this patriarchal system where we are saying a woman who has her own struggle credentials by her own right, who's performed in government departments, is being reduced to her past relationships. Has that message not maybe won the argument in terms of her relationship with the president?
I mean, look at the other candidates that we've been talking about, and that simply says to you that the issue of patriarchy is out. You look at Balekambete, you look at Lindiwe Sisulu, you look at now there's Naledi Pandor as the deputy to Cyril. There's no one who has said a woman shouldn't be higher up in terms of ANC presidency or deputy presidency. The fact is, leave the fact that she's a woman. We are now focusing on the fact of association. We are judging her by association, and we cannot sit here and then say we are going to disregard the association or people that she hangs out with. That is going to put a dent on her campaign, because those people are part of the problem that we face now. The state that we are in, those are the kind of people who have hugely contributed to the mess that we're in.
Before we move to the CR17 campaign, Mondli, the argument others have is that because of the high unemployment rates, we know what the poverty levels are, given what Stats SA has released, is that people who are unemployed, who are desperate for jobs, the graduates who now have tertiary bills but cannot get jobs, the people trapped in the vicious circle of poverty, that message resonates with them more than the stories we continue to publish around the links to the tobacco smugglers, the Gupta money. They want to hear the story around this economy will be turned around and in your favor.
Yeah, that is correct, but people are not stupid. When Jacob Zuma came into power, basically kind of like his rise to power in 2007, between 2005 and 2007, rise to the ANC presidency, it was very much on a populist ticket. And his ascension to power in 2009, where it was not just ANC members, but the broader public that voted, gave the ANC 62%. There was a lot of that thing that, like, man of the people, he was...
The simple man.
Simple man, he's going to connect with us. It's not like those, the elitist Mbeki and so on. And he was going to connect to them, and things are going to move much quicker and so on. 10 years later, the people see it. And you see them on the streets, burning tires. I mean, like, the traffic report in South Africa is basically kind of like avoided road because there's the protests, right? For protests and that particular... People know how they've been cheated. People know about the Guptas. People know the corruption that's there. And people know, basically, people have began to connect misgovernance and corruption to their conditions. And you're not going to fool them by simply saying radical economic transformation, we're going to give you land. They've drunk that Kool-Aid before and it wasn't sweet. So I think that that message may resonate with a certain portion of the ANC membership. But that's a membership which already, I think, is committed to a particular camp. I mean, particularly kind of like people who support a Premier League premier, for instance. People in KZN who identify with Zuma and therefore will identify with her. So I don't think the radical economic transformation message has actually gotten on to people to say, hey, people know, as I said earlier on, people know that that inequality and poverty wears a racial face in South Africa. And all you are doing by pushing that message is just fueling anger and so on. So, but I do think that, I mean, like, you know, some people say that the stories that we in the media write don't necessarily get to people. People don't take those stories seriously. People know that the Guptas are bad. If you walk out on the street now and like, you speak to people at the Guptas, people know that the Guptas are bad and that the Guptas are associated with the president. And so, you know, the whole thing that you can fool the people some of the time. You can't anymore.
Let's talk about the Cyril Ramaphosa campaign. Initially sparked off by, you know, it's tradition of the ANC that the deputy must succeed, something that I find not in a democratic state, perhaps, that we shouldn't have such obvious choices, but that is how his campaign started. From where you're sitting, Reggie, what would be the advantages for him in this campaign?
Well, look, besides Marikana, first of all, let's talk about the candidate himself. I mean, besides Marikana, what happened in Marikana, there's still him being the deputy president. We haven't had any association of him and the Guptas. We haven't had that, you know, he knows the ins and outs of the Saxon Welshebin. He's been in government, and we have seen that he's been running sort of a clean bill of governance, and he's got his track record there. I mean, what happened with Marikana and those emails nearly put a really unwanted dent on his reputation. And we saw earlier on the attempt with the emails of, you know, the sexual links that a certain paper was trying to drive that agenda. And it's been a campaign, basically, that's saying, as Mondu was saying, we want the state capture inquiry to get going because South Africans want answers. It's been that kind of a campaign. It's been a campaign where he's been wanting to be out there, but I mean, by and large, and that was kind of expected, that he was going to face certain difficulties in a province like KZN, where it's a strong Zuma stronghold. When he gets there, he won't be as, you know, well as, you know, accepted as when he's speaking anyway in Gauteng. And any province for that matter that the Premier League dominates. The Premier League, we know that, I mean, out of all, say, 3 of them, the Mpumalanga Premier is quite the strongest candidate out of all of them because he's seen as this experienced politician who can pull everyone towards his side. So it's been that kind of a campaign for him. It's been clean, it's been well run, and I mean, in a month's time, we'll see how convinced are the branches, because all those almost 4,000 branch delegates who are coming to Nasrec, they'll be the ones to decide to say, this is our man, and we're convinced that he's the right guy.
But mainly, Cyril Ramaphosa is also in President Jacob Zuma's executive. And that has been the criticism leveled against him, to say that to come out in public and criticize when you sit in those cabinet meetings where some of these decisions that have been detrimental to the economy are being taken, and say now you will do things differently. How much damage can that do to him as a candidate?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the ANC and the country, one big mistake that the ANC and South Africa can make, in this particular instance, is repeating the mistake of 10 years ago, when the ANC did not had enough of Thabo Mbeki. So they wanted somebody who was not Thabo Mbeki. And we got this that we have now. And what we run the risk, I'm going to say we, but like the ANC and 2019, the country, we run the risk of doing as a society is going for somebody who's not, simply because the person is not Jacob Zuma. And I think a lot of people are aligning with Cyril Ramaphosa because Cyril Ramaphosa is not Jacob Zuma, is the antithesis of Jacob Zuma. And we are willing to overlook all his flaws and all his shortcomings. And one of Ramaphosa's shortcomings was his timidity. Ramaphosa served, like he was on the NEC of the ANC through the Thabo Mbeki years. He said very little when Thabo Mbeki was doing what he was doing about AIDS and Zimbabwe and like authoritarianism that crept in under Mbeki. And so he was not courageous in standing up to Thabo Mbeki. Under Zuma, he's been on that National Executive Committee and the NWC of the ANC under Jacob Zuma. And then in 2012, he was elected Deputy President of the ANC in order to give a decent face.
Credibility, they called it at the time,
credibility to the Jacob Zuma ticket, because there was a more credible Kgalema Motlanthe on the other side. So he lent credibility to that. And we've been through 2012 since he's been Deputy President of the ANC, and then 2014, the President of the country, the Deputy President of the country, rather. After 2012, we will all remember there was a Gupta landing at Vatekloof Airport. Like a very, very grievous offense against the people of South Africa. Did Cyril Ramaphosa, the Deputy President of the ANC in the country, and the Deputy President of the ANC at the time in 2013, say anything? 2014, he's been Deputy President of the country. And the Gupta eating was now kind of like, it was a festival, it was a carnival. The Guptas were eating left, right, and center, and he was aware of this because he had access to what was happening in the SOEs. The worst Zuma years, Cyril Ramaphosa has been quite easy, and he only started speaking out this year, and only after civil society actually was now on the streets and people were saying no to Zuma, Zuma must go. So we need to question not just his courage, but what he really stands for. And I think for me, that's the one thing. Are we electing a non-Zuma candidate if we do as a country elect Ramaphosa as the next president of the country? Is the ANC electing him as a non-Zuma candidate because he's standing against Dlamini Zuma? So
I'm actually finding that interesting because Ronnie Castrol's, when he was launching his book last night, he talked about how he said to Thabo Mbeki, go for a third term, and he was pushing for that third term because he felt at the time there wasn't anybody strong enough to contest Thabo Mbeki in 2007. And it also sounded like a repeat where you're looking for anybody but Zuma, which is a campaign that we've had in 2012 at that elective conference. But Cyril Ramaphosa himself, that silence in those NEC years of Thabo Mbeki when he went into business, some have said, the ANC delegates and the ANC members kind of lost touch with him because he left politics for business, and it's only now that we're starting to hear him have a voice as the election campaign starts off. And his support is mainly coming from alliance partners, the SACP and COSATU, and we know their relationship with the ANC is at an all-time low. Who else within the ANC does he push for that support, for him to get these numbers that we're seeing coming in?
Well, look, Maslas, the people who are there at the moment, they'd like to see their ANC staying afloat. They'd like to see this ANC continue to govern. One of those provinces, without a shadow of a doubt, is Gauteng. Gauteng would certainly like to see the ANC being saved from itself. Hence, Mashatile is in Ramaphosa's slate, the top six, whatever not. And I would believe that much as you also have a province that's dominantly anti-Ramaphosa like KZN, he has a little campaign there. He has campaigners who are touting for him and all that.
Senzom Mchunu on the slate.
Exactly. Yeah. So the ANC is a party at war with itself. We know that. It's the factions within the ANC are way, way too deeper. So the other factions, I mean, if you go to, we look at all these court cases, those court cases are telling us here's a divided ANC, whether you're in Northern Cape or Eastern Cape or KZN. So one faction or the other, he'll still have that. And then it's a ticket of, look who I am and what I've done and where I've started. I've started in Noom and I've been here, and he's that kind of a politician. He's a politician who says, I'll conveniently speak when I'm called on to speak. But when it matters the most, out of the blue, where he's supposed to speak, he doesn't speak.
But Reggie, the reason I'm asking that question is that, you know, you both talked about a once powerful entity called the Premier League, which still has a lot of support in some of the provinces, a bit weaker than we had them in 2012 maybe. But one of the reasons why his announcement of Naledi Pandor as his deputy was seen as a serious blunder was that it then closes any other wheeling and dealing that would have happened behind the scenes to find space for people like Didi Mabuza, for example, who now has the second largest province in terms of delegates.
Absolutely. That was, I mean, he put his foot in it. Let's not hold back then, and let's call it what it is. As to what he was thinking, announcing all those names, as much as they say it's an ANC, it was really strategically stupid on his part to do that. Because you get someone like Didi, as you rightly say, he's a wheeler and dealer of note, more especially behind closed doors. He's the guy credited with starting the Premier League and playing a key role there. So why announce? And also, there's now questions being asked to say, we don't mind a woman being your deputy, but why her? Out of all the names that you could have come up with, she may be scandal-free and all that, but did we discuss her? Did we say we can put her there as a likely deputy? He should have held back, and then he should have said, okay, let's sit back and then let's see who are these top six. Much as you want to balance out the provinces, but the other names are there, they're okay, but the deputy is a problem because Lindiwe Sisulu was still being discussed. Is she out? Is she in? If she's out, can we bring her in or not?
And also, I mean, we've seen the branch nominations, some of them going for Lindiwe Sisulu as a deputy, but others going for Didi Mabuza, even on the Cyril Ramaphosa slate. I mean, others have said the good thing about naming Naledi Pandor is that he's preparing himself for 2019 when the ANC is, if he wins, of course, in December. But he was looking for a slate that says, you know, I've got credible people who are scandal-free. Mandli?
And when Naledi Pandor is 103 years old, but
but that is such an unfair criticism. I mean, all of these candidates are all in their 60s. I found that very strange that people are saying that she's old, when Lindiwe is also 63, 64 around there. Zweli Mkhize maybe 61, 62 if I'm not mistaken, but all of them are in their 60s.
No, but there is a problem with this current lineup. I mean, as much as it's great that there's a lot of people lining up to be the next president, but I think the age issue is a big problem for all of them. As we all know, the world is going the other direction. And to have the only people, I mean, like you hardly have somebody who basically kind of like late 40s, early 50s, the next generation. It means that by the time Ramaphosa leaves, let's say he gets into office, or him or Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma gets into office, they'll be well into their mid to late 60s, and if they get a second term, they'll be in their 70s. And in a very youthful country, and in a country that requires a different kind of thinking, different answers. But insofar as Naledi Pandor's and him nominating Naledi Pandor, I think there are two things that he did very wrong, and that has been canvassed very widely the past few days, is that why was there a need for him as the presidential candidate to be the one who makes that announcement? There's a way of doing this thing, and it's been done. This slate circulate, and people, your lobbyists talk, and people will speak on your behalf. Why do you stand up there while the branch nomination process is happening, and actually be the one to try and influence the branches to do 1, 2, 3. Then secondly, and Reggie has pointed this out, that what does Naledi Pandor bring in terms of numbers? You are going into an elective conference, and it's
a numbers game. It's a numbers game, yeah. But the two of them, before I move to the other candidate who won't be on the ballot, but probably very important, President Jacob Zuma, in this election. In that numbers game, did he not need to make that announcement because of the divisions that were emerging in terms of who the deputy was going to be, and in extension preparing for 2019?
No, I think he was, the big mistake was that clearly what was coming through from the branches was that Lindiwe Sisulu and to a certain extent David Mabuza were emerging as his preferred deputies. That's your people speaking to you. Yeah. And you are now wanting to impose your will on your supporters. They can rebel against you and say, no, we reject this candidate of yours, and that will be serious egg on your face.
Beyond the December elective conference, what good are any of them to South Africa's future, given that the ANC has been the governing party I mean, as a non-ANC delegate, as a South African who probably is looking forward to what happens in the next 5 years, these two candidates?
Well, look, any of the two candidates, they're going to have the tough task of, it's 2019, it's 25 years of us being in government. You go to a simple website like Stats SA, you look at the numbers there, the numbers are depressing.
Very grim, yeah.
The numbers are saying for the past 25 years, you guys have done nothing but exacerbate the situation, more especially of the poor. You have made this country one of the most unequal in the world. Now, it's 2019. You guys need to tell me why I should give you another opportunity, another 5 years, and we say you have ruled this country for 30 years. What have you done for me? What have we achieved? So that will be the tough task.
Mondli, for South Africans?
Yeah, look, I think the great disappointment with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is that she's actually, she is presidential material. She actually is a very strong person. She's smart, she's hard, she's experienced, she's equipped to lead. And I think she could smile a bit more, I think. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like, it would help to kind of like see a bit of her, for her to be able to count more than 20 times that she smiles in a year. But nonetheless, so well, the greatest disappointment is her aligning herself with these dodgy types. And that's we got earlier on, and Reggie did mention that, that there's Carl Niehaus there, a fraudster, self-confessed fraudster, liar, thief, everything. A man who's actually confessed to having lied about having cancer in order to get sympathy and money. And that is the public face of your campaign. So that's a great disappointment. And if she becomes president of the ANC or of the party, or of South Africa, first of all, she'll not be able to renew the ANC because she's got these people around her. So I think it's tickets for the party if she gets in. And if she becomes president of the country again, she'll be quite indebted to the people who put her there. So I think that's problematic. I think with Ramaphosa, I think there needs to be a lot of interrogation of who Ramaphosa is, what he stands for. Let's not just accept him as the acceptable face, because he is not so many people. Who are the people around him? Like there have been questions that have been raised by his opponents around that. And I think, and also just his backbone and courage. And because as a South African, you want somebody, somebody kind of like who's going to be able to go out in the world and stand up for you, someone who's got bruises on their face because they've gone through wars.
We are quickly running out of time, but I think we have to talk about President Jacob Zuma. A lot of people have suggested that this conference could also decide his future. Between Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa, who would have the guts to recall him at the NEC, that first NEC meeting in January 2018?
The name there will be Cyril Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa, I think, will have the guts. It's an obvious choice there.
Does it not depend on his margins at the elective conference, or do you think we might actually have a surprise with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma doing the same?
I think if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma recalls him, gets into power, there will probably be a deal made for him to vacate earlier. And I think he will probably agree to that on condition that 1, 2, 3. And that is him not wearing orange overalls. And so I think the more important thing, I think if Cyril gets in, then I think there'll be a definite recall there, kind of like a hostile recall. But I think the important thing beyond him being recalled is what happens to his legal woes. There are the 783 counts that we all keep talking about, and the case is going to, basically, it's going to be very difficult for Sean Abrams and the NPA not to pursue the prosecution. And a president who comes in, all they can do is just kick for touch, and at some point a decision will have to be made. But I think that's the most important thing, is what happens, and those are those 783 counts. And Jacob Zuma, between 2009 and today, has committed a heck of a lot more crimes that have not yet been properly investigated. So Sun City does beckon for him, but the question is, which president will be prepared to take him there?
I mean, Reggie, you know, it's one thing, we talk about the presidential hopefuls, but we forget about how powerful an NEC of the ANC is, because we've seen with President Jacob Zuma, where 2 attempts at the National Executive Committee, and he survives all of them. Do you think that the ANC delegates are thinking about that structure? Because at the ultimate end, it is the one that decides in between conferences.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw what happened in Mangaung, which was quite incredible to most of us to say. First of all, the NEC was bloated. And it was bloated by a whole lot of people who were pro-Zuma. And it was quite intentional what the goal was there. And we have seen it in recent NEC meetings, that you cannot just stand up and question some of the decisions that he's made, the decisions that the NWC, that's strongly pro-Zuma, also makes. So whoever is coming in will obviously want to have a strong NEC that's aligned towards that candidate. I mean, Mangaung, to some of us, shocked us that in the NEC of the ANC, you can have a candidate like Humphrey Memezi, whom, you know, we have seen, we have managed to remove him as a Gauteng MEC because of his ways, his corrupt ways, and then he managed to get himself into that NEC. It was a showing to say, this is what happens when the candidate is there, he has retained, I mean, Mangaung, it was retention for him, and says, I need a bigger NEC, there'll be promises of a bloated cabinet, and these will all be people that says, yes, sir.
Last question, gentlemen, as we wrap up. This has been a conference defined as one that has to save the ANC, even at the polls, beyond its own internal fights, as they go towards 2019. Can a conference really save the ANC from itself, Monty?
Well, it can and can't. I know that's dodgy here. Yeah. Because I think it might be the conference that actually leads to a much bigger split or splinter than previous conferences. Because the levels of hatred that are there currently means that these people cannot live with each other. I don't quite see, particularly people who have been aligned with their veterans and stalwarts, living under a regime that has the Nkosazana Zuma faction. Because it's not just her and her top six. To be an NEC that is predominantly that side of the fence, and the NEC that will be defined by that. So I don't see them accepting that. So I think people will move elsewhere. Similarly, on the other side, the hatred towards Cyril Ramaphosa from the other side, and the fear of what a Cyril Ramaphosa run ANC and government might do to certain individuals who have done untoward things. There's also a fear around that. So I think it will probably be the conference that will be known as, it's not the beginning of the end, but there will be a rupture in December.
Reggie, do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's a conference, Mahlatse, that these candidates, these branch delegates who are going there, they should be saying to themselves, you know, it's one of the most challenging conferences we have ever undertaken. But the last challenging conference that we had, we managed to be led by a president for 30 years. That was O.R. Tambo, and they've been preaching O.R. Tambo all this year. They should ask themselves, how did that man manage to keep the organization afloat for 30 years? And we are walking into this conference and we are divided like never before. It was the same in Tanzania. Are we able to leave this Nasrec venue and say our organization is still in one piece and our organization can still lead?
As we end off, I'm going to put you two gentlemen on the spotlight. Who are you giving it to, Mondli?
That's Ramaphosa.
Mondli?
Look, I would say, yeah, I think given what we are finding out, what's coming out of the branch nominations now, I think Ramaphosa has the edge, but you know what, there's a month to go, there's underhand things that are still going to happen. So, but I think if I had to bet a bottle of something or the other, I would bet a CR17 win.
Well, there's the two editor-in-chiefs, Mondli Makanya of the City Press and Reggie Lucy of Daily Sun. They are putting their bet on Cyril Ramaphosa. I'm going to say there's something worryingly too quiet about the NDZ campaign in this past few weeks. I think it's a bit too early to call it, but I think after the 15th of November, as the provincial nomination conferences get underway, we'll get a clearer sign. That has been our special edition of Polotiki. We were coming to you live from Media 24. Remember, you can catch our weekly podcast every Friday at 10 a.m. on news24.com. Thank you.